It's cold. You guys got to get the heating going.
Harvey, maybe you said he fixed it yesterday, but then
Apparently didn't.
that seems to be the case.
We're gonna get a real thin crowd soon. We keep having cold days. I'm like, I don't even want to come. It's too cold. Well, the Chaitanya Charitamrita calls the spreading of our tradition para upakar, or the greatest welfare work, the topmost welfare work. So if you spread the Sankirtan mission, if you spread our tradition around the world, it's para upakar. And then another description of the devotees is that they're para dukkha dukhi, which means that they are saddened when they see somebody else suffering. So it's both positively and negatively. So the greatest thing you can do for our tradition is to share your wealth, your spiritual wealth, with other people. And then part of that is also that when you see people suffering, you also feel sad. Now, right off the bat, the idea that when you see somebody suffering, then you also feel sad, right off the bat, that makes me think codependence. You guys know the term codependence? You just want to get a chair? It's like the perfect height? You know, one's not enough for me either. You get one, it's almost like, it's now almost making it worse. It digs into you, it's like, almost makes it worse. Codependence is a popular psychology term. It's not actually a term which is used amongst professionals. So if you have no training and you just read a couple of magazine articles about psychology, then you might use the term. And you find, like, in self-help Instagram circles, the term shows up a lot. But it's not in the DSM. The DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is a book which is put out every 5 or so years, where they list all of the mental health disorders in the world. And then things change. I'm good. Thank you, man, very much for it. Thank you. I was being a little, melodramatic. Thanks, Narayan. Very considerate of you. Anyway, things change. You know, different things are considered to be mental illness, and then they're not. Being gay was considered to be a mental illness. It was illegal in this country up until, I believe, it was 1970. But it was a mental illness. It would have been in the DSM. If they had a DSM at that time, it would have been in it. Video game addiction is not in the DSM. I think it should be. I think it will be in due course of time. It's just not there yet. I don't know if online chess is there, but it's like a niche addiction. It's not enough volume. It's like a small enough crowd of nerds around the world. Ross is actually really good at chess. Are you ranked too?
I suck.
Huh?
I suck.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do too. My kids have been beating me since they were like 7 or 8. It's like a spatial thing where you sort of see. I don't have it. So yeah, I think as soon as I think para dukkha dukhi, that you feel suffering when you see somebody else suffer, and immediately I start to think, well, that sounds kind of codependent. And codependent's a bad thing. Of course, you guys don't know what the term means. Generally, I'm expecting that people are going to know the term and then not realize that it's not in the DSM, it's not a term which is used by professionals, and that's going to be the wow moment. But you guys are too ignorant for that. And so now I have to explain to you what it means, because telling you it's not actually a thing, you don't even know it is a thing because you don't know the word. So it's like, you follow? Like a step behind you're a step behind the humor. Codependent was originally created in, what was that?
An attempt at being discreet?
Was it required?
Nope. Oh, what I just did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. In the 40s, the Alcoholics Anonymous people came up with the term. The dependent was the person who was taking drugs and alcohol. The codependent was the person who lived with or was connected to the person who was addicted to drugs and alcohol. So you were the codependent because your life was also made a living hell by being with the person who was addicted to alcohol. You follow? So you were a codependent. In fact, they have CODA meetings, which is Codependent Anonymous. And so they actually have meetings for people who are not alcoholics, but in a relationship with somebody who's an alcoholic, and you go to meetings. It's a 12-step program, but it's a 12-step program that doesn't involve talking about drugs and alcohol or a particular vice. It's just your relationship with that person that leads you to the process of self-realization. That's another one. Alcoholics Anonymous is a religion. And in their official creed, which is a pretty good sign you're dealing with a religion, they state emphatically that they're not a religion in a sort of hypocritical, condescending way to make themselves sound better than everybody else. It's like you get these non-denominational Christians who think that if you're a denominational Christian, you're bogus, but they're cool because they're non-denominational, but they don't realize that being non-denominational is actually a denomination. It's a denomination called non-denominational, and they have rules and a creed and standards that have to be followed in order to belong to their church. Ayn Rand, she wrote a couple of books, Atlas Shrugged, and I think it was The Fountainhead. Was that the other one? Yeah. And so she has a little religion surrounding her also. They call it an atheistic religion, so it's not really, but they call it objectivism, which I just thought was like so classic. Because her philosophy of life isn't at all objective. It's not like she was like a great philosopher or something like that. It's just she's like a super materialistic, chain-smoking person, and then wrote a couple of books and got a little following and called it objectivism, which is just a way of saying I'm super delusional and have like major narcissism in addition to a philosophy, because I think I'm objective and everybody else isn't. You guys follow this? Yeah, it's like just a different phenomenon, different manifestations of the "are you judging me" phenomena, which means that you're judging me for judging you, so you're judging, and so you're back to that. The language you use is important. Like gay people coined the term homophobic, which is brilliant because people can't hate gay people. They can only be afraid of them now. There's no other term for being bigoted. There's no bigoted term that you're against gay people. The only option you have if you have a problem with gay people is to be homophobic, which means you're afraid of them, you're scared of them. It's just an absolutely brilliant piece of marketing and branding. Because, generally speaking, the people who are against gay people are going to be kind of rednecky type, unwoke, Red Sea type individuals from like those flyover states. And so and so by calling them homophobic, then it means they're afraid of gay people. It's a full rip. Because if you think of yourself as being macho and unafraid of anything, then you have to admit, yeah, I'm homophobic. And like you have to admit like you're afraid of something. Like I have agoraphobia or claustrophobia. It's like you have some kind of mental disorder. Just another one. Not only is it emasculating in the sense that it makes it sound like you're afraid of something, but the whole idea of phobias is that they are mental disorders. So now, if you're bigoted against gay people, you have to admit you have a mental disorder. You follow? And there's no other term. There's no other term. Think about it. It didn't used to exist. When I was a kid growing up, the term didn't exist. They figured it out somehow. Somebody, probably up in the Bay Area. They sat down, some brilliant person up in the Bay Area sat down and figured it out. It was like, we're going to make this show up on Google, like, all the time. Top of the hit list. And then, presto change it. The whole world has a neologism. That's a new word. And the word makes it uncool to have a problem with gay people. Just simply based on the language. You follow? So what we choose to term things is actually quite important. A short, pithy mission statement is actually really important. It communicates to everybody who works in your organization what you're about. ISKCON has an unofficial mission statement. You know what it is? Yeah, it's just absolutely brilliant. The guy who did it is seriously into corporate branding, and he came up with it. More devotees, happier devotees. So it's got alliteration, right? Using the word, the 4 words, and you use the word devotees twice, right? So there's the alliteration, right? More quantity, happier quality. Outreach, inreach. Within our community, for new people. It's just a brilliant piece of branding. Well, how does it work in Spanish? Más devotees, más feliz devotees. Yeah, it's not as cool. It's not as cool in Spanish. It doesn't flow at all. It doesn't work at all, does it? So whatever. Okay, that's a bummer. But the words you use, like core, tight definitions that you use to describe something, are important. And so one of the definitions of a devotee is that they are para dukkha dukhi. They are saddened by seeing the suffering of another. That makes me worry about being labeled as codependent. Codependent, although it initially meant the person who was in a relationship with the alcoholic, what's come to mean nowadays in popular psychology is it means somebody who is in a negative relationship with a narcissistic person and they become dependent on that person and they derive their sense of identity from the relationship with that person. Very similar to the psychology that leads to fascism, which is a totalitarian form of government, but it also has sort of an idol figure at the center of it, a Mussolini or a Hitler, who personifies the ideals of the totalitarian regime. And so there's a power behind that kind of personality cult because it foments everything around an individual, and you're really able to galvanize things, and people give up their sense of self and become a part of something bigger, which is personified by this individual at the head of the whole thing. So a codependent relationship is usually it's a what do you call the victim of the narcissist?
The dependent?
Yeah. So the codependent is usually used to refer popularly to the victim of a narcissist. It can also sometimes mean where you're both train wrecks. And of course, narcissists are the ultimate train wreck, but it means that you're both train wrecks in the sense of nobody is throwing out love bombs. You're both two like depressed, heroin addict, emo, skinny, couch potatoes, and you just, wallowing in your own feces and unable to do anything in life, but you happen to do it together. You follow? That also, codependence also works for that. And so it refers to, I think more technically it refers to when you, and again, it's not a technical term, it's a loose term, but if I was really going to dial it in, what people are trying to get at, if you really want to turn it into a language that was rigorous, the codependent person gives up their core values to stay in proximity with the person they're dependent on. Do you guys follow that? Because the idea of being dependent on somebody as being a bad thing ignores the fact that we're social mammals and that we live in packs like all social mammals. And it's a good survival technique. And it also makes life more fun. Life is more fun with other people. The game of life is infinitely more fun with other people. If you accept something like that love is the goal of life, then you need people to love. And self-love, devoid of the ability to love other people, becomes pretty crippled pretty quick. Human beings tend to really go down dramatically when you put them in isolation. Which is one of the reasons why ADSEG, more generally known as solitary confinement, is considered to be such almost a criminal thing, because it drives prisoners insane when they are put into isolation for extended periods of time. They start talking to themselves and they go batty, because it's human nature to be with other people, to be able to talk, express yourself, and essentially exchange love in some capacity. So, there's this myth that if dependence is bad, if codependence is bad, then the goal would be to be independent. Or that you need to be independent and then you can be interdependent. That's kind of a pithy thing people say. But I don't see any circumstance where a human being should be totally independent. I don't see where you shouldn't care what the people you care about think of you. This whole idea of people's opinions about you is like none of my business, I don't care. No, you should actually care what people think about you. You shouldn't care what every single person on the street cares about you. Then like the homeless guy is screaming obscenities at himself. You think he's talking to you and you get all mental and you get all depressed and he doesn't even know you exist. He's totally schizophrenic and you're like super dependent on what anybody says at any time. That's ridiculous. But the idea that you craft a group of people around you and you care what they think, that is, I think, the most natural thing in the world. I think it's as natural as breathing and as natural, not quite, I'm being a bit hyperbolic, but it's natural in the same way that breathing and eating and having a domicile and, having some recreation in your life are just absolute, or exercise, are just absolute requirements for a healthy life. Interaction, exchange of love, relationships are absolutely required for life. And the very nature of a relationship is it's relational, and you become relativized by the person that you're close to. And you become, to some extent, dependent on them. It's natural. It happens when children are very young. It's called attachment theory, but it's pretty much universally accepted these days in psychology that when children grow up, they attach themselves to a figure, and then they want to always be close to that figure. And if they're left away from that figure, they start to feel separation anxiety. And there's a kind of an expansion of that theory is that many problems that we see in adults are because at that age of attachment, the age of whatever it is, 6 years, 6 months to like 3 years, whatever that age is, it's a critical age. Something went wrong in their attachment figure, betrayed them or wasn't there or abandoned them, and it just messes with your basic psychology. So the fact that infants do it automatically, along with drinking their mother's breast milk, is a pretty good indication that it's about as natural as you can possibly get. You follow? So what really, as an adult, what you really need to do is you need to decide who you're going to be dependent on, who you're going to care about enough that their opinion matters, who you're going to sink or swim with, who's going to be your band of brothers, who's going to be your tribe, who you're going to go to war with, who's going to be your ride or die, whose back you're going to have, who's going to have your back, who you're going to work with, who you're going to play with, who you're going to live with. That's the big one. Not whether or not you're going to care about anybody or be affected by anybody. That's just it's a fool's errand. But rather, who you're going to live life with. Another big mistake people make is they think a romantic partner is the entirety of their life, and the goal of life is to find a romantic partner and then make a life with that person, and it's you and them. And that's it, you and them against the world, and that's the most important thing. It's another delusion that leads to, honestly, a crippled life. Not no life. People pull it off, but it's a crippled life. It's an impoverished life. Much better life is where you love deeply and intimately your family, your extended family, your friends, your romantic partner. You have a number of significant relationships in your life that you put time into and maintain because they're valuable. And you're grown up enough that you can walk and chew gum and not just have one best friend. Mark Twain, he said the most overrated pleasure in the world is sex. Yeah, he said sex, but yeah, sex is orgasm. So if you said sex, I would have said yeah, and sex basically boils down to orgasm. So you got the right answer. The most overrated pleasure in the world is sex, orgasm. I mean, admittedly, it's an oxytocin release, and it adjusts your serotonin levels. It might even give you a little dopamine hit too, but it's a self-contained drug. It's a way of getting yourself high without having to go out and buy something. You follow? You got those neurotransmitters in you, and there's a way that you can make those neurotransmitters fire off and get released into your body, and you don't have to use an outside external source to do it. It's like the drugs are within you. You follow? He says it's the most overrated pleasure in the world. And I concur. I fully agree with Mark Twain. Then he said the most underrated pleasure in the world is? That's it. Passing stool is the most underrated pleasure in the world. Think about it, and you'll realize he's right. Ever been constipated? You follow? That sucks. Ever had a really good bowel movement after a period of being constipated? It's downright rapturous. Eat more fiber. I think one of the most underrated pleasures in the world is a good community. And one of the most overrated pleasures in the world is a romantic partner. I'm adding to Mark Twain's list. I think we functionally devalue our platonic relationships, and we overvalue our romantic relationships. And you know this because people obsess over finding a spouse, and while doing so, they end up devaluing and minimizing the value of and not exploring a rich world of platonic friendships. A lot of languages have multiple words for love, precisely because they want to make sure that, romantic love exists, and then they also have, like agape versus eros or something like that. I think there's a third word in Greek for love, which is escaping me at the moment. Maybe philos, agape, and eros. Those are the three words in Greek for love. And so you have, anyway, amor y desear, right? Yeah. Huh? Querer, right? Also, yeah. So kind of three words, right? Yeah. I guess querer and amor are the two main ones. Desear is not so much. Yeah. It's there, but yeah, okay, fair enough. All right. So anyway, other languages have multiple words. We use the word love in multiple ways, and we just depend on the people who we're with knowing what we're talking about. So if you want to know what codependence is, or when your natural, automatic, I'm a social mammal, I'm a human being, it's the most natural thing in the world to need people. If you want to know when your need for someone is unhealthy, you want to know when you cross that line, it's when your need to be in proximity with that person results in you giving up your core values. Now, you guys are all lucky because a religion essentially is a set of core values that's just handed to you automatically. That's why AA is a religion, because when you read their credo and you read their literature and you look at the way their organization is set up, you're like, this is a religion. And they have values. If you don't, and they have a language, and they have a value system, and they have a methodology, and a whole thing. When they write tracts that are supposed to be universally accepted in their church, they say, this was approved by the National Convention of AA, and it represents current group thinking, it represents current, organizational thinking, and they're essentially making a claim to authority. Is what's happening there. But anyway, I did a whole thing one time where I got an AA devotee, And I said, you're a religion. Like, no, we're not. And they showed me in their track where it said they weren't a religion. So I went home for a day and read through all their tracks and and then I took a map of what makes up a core of a religion and showed how they were just every single thing they were hitting on. And then showed it to them, and they just lost their minds and hated me. And then 6 months later, they came back and they were, you're right, it was a cult. So if you want to know when your dependence on somebody is unhealthy, it's when you give up your values for that person. That's when you know. Now, if you're too young, you don't have a value system, so it's kind of rough because you don't know what your values are, and therefore it's hard to know when you've gone on some mission drift and you've segued away from your value system for the approval or to be in proximity with another person. Do you guys follow this? And proximity, I mean emotional proximity as well as physical proximity. Which children develop also very quickly. A need for emotional proximity as well as physical proximity. Like, you're going to be holding your kid, but if you're not giving them your attention, they notice and they get bent out of shape. Sometimes your kid will grab your face and turn it towards them. Pay attention to me. Don't just hold me. Pay attention to me. I was in India once as a monk, living in an ashram in Delhi, and just kind of transitionally on my way to Vrindavan. I was on my way somewhere, and there was this bodybuilder kid who came to the temple a lot and somehow made friends with me. Really strong Indian guy. Usually Indian guys aren't that strong. This guy was really strong. Had a 500-pound deadlift to put it into actual terms. And maybe a 350, 400-pound bench press. So, it was like a very strong Indian guy. And now I kind of think of he's probably on roids. I'm thinking it through now. It's just doing the math, I'm thinking, hey, wait a second. Should have been that. So I was trying to figure out, how the heck is this guy so strong? Anyway, one time we were talking, I was cooking or something like that, and he was hanging out in the kitchen. And he actually grabbed my face. He tried to talk to me, and I was ignoring him just back, and he grabbed my face and turned it towards him. And I was like, whoa, bro. We're not doing that. Anyway, I just thought that sometimes adults will do that. They grab your face and turn it towards them. There's a thing called Sahib disease. British soldiers would get it. Sahib means Lord. They would start to really hate Indian people because Indian culture is just so foreign from English or American culture. And so, we say, hey, you want to go see a movie? No, yeah, let's go. In India, it's do you want to go get something to eat? Yeah, no, let's stay home. They don't want to ever say no to you. So they'll say, ji na, yes, no, instead of just saying no. Or they'll find some other way to say no to you that never involves actually saying no. And so you get these conversations and relationships where it's really tough to pin somebody down because nobody wants to ever say no and have a direct conversation. If you're from a culture where directness is valued, and you get these Chinese culture or even Japanese culture to some extent, let's speak of Indian culture, where, a social lubrication is kind of more the order of the day, and so people just really don't want to offend one another. Happens in great big civilizations because everybody's got to get along, so you don't want to rub everybody the wrong way. In more feudal type societies or us versus them societies, we can get away with being really direct because we can have a war with you and kill you. But if you're all getting along and there's no massive civil wars and you're not putting people in slavery and stuff like that, then you got to figure out a way to get along, and so you end up with an inclusivistic society as opposed to an individualistic society. It's a whole sociological phenomenon that can largely be traced to the nature of the civilization. But anyway, that gets played out in interpersonal relationships. But yeah, I remember. So yes, I was talking to somebody trying to get an answer out of them, and they were wagging their head at me, and like they didn't want to say no to me, but I knew the answer was no. And like they wouldn't go, no. They wouldn't give me like a no. They were just like maybe. They were trying to maybe me. Couldn't quite read the wog, but they were doing kind of a maybe thing. And I actually grabbed them by the head. And I said, "This is yes. This is no." That's not my proudest moment. It's therapeutic for me. It's like an AA meeting. It's my share. It's rock bottom. And they would have to send English people back home to England because they would start to get really violent. They would start to get violent. You know what I mean? And the British could kill people and get away with it. And so they would start to get really abusive and really violent towards the Indian people who were largely their indentured servants. And so they would have to send them back because they would just go kind of crazy. So if you want to know when codependence is becoming a problem, it's when you give up your core values for the person. If you don't have core values, then you have to think it through. You actually do have core values. You just haven't thought about it deeply enough to know what they are. Good thing about a religion or a philosophy is it says, hey, we thought about it, and here's our core values, and here's why we have them, and we'll just show you our arithmetic, and you can go through it and check it, and if you like it, you can make it your own and add to it. And then you encounter these great minds, you stand on the shoulders of giants, you can see much further because they took the trouble to think stuff through in a serious way. And so you can look at their math, it doesn't stop you. It doesn't stop you from inspecting their math and scrutinizing it, but you don't have to just start from scratch. Like imagine if you went to a gym and you just had to start from scratch and no one would ever show you. You could never see somebody else doing an exercise. Or better yet, you had to build your own equipment. Everybody just had to figure it out, build your own equipment, figure out what exercise consisted of for you. I don't want to tell you what exercise is for you. That would be inappropriate. It might be abusive. And so we all have to figure it out for ourselves. And so everybody's got to figure out what exercise means and make your own equipment and make your own and you go through all of the trouble that everybody is and reinvent the wheel every single generation. That's preposterous. It's also preposterous philosophically speaking in terms of developing values, in terms of axiology, developing your value system, a code that you live by. And so in a lot of ways growing up is encountering great minds and learning from them and being able to step on their shoulders and see further than you ever could on your own. So if you don't have a value system, you're I don't know what my value system is. Yeah, we could probably sit down and talk and figure out what your value system is. Hey, what do you spend your time doing? What do you think about during the day? Let me ask you a question. In this situation, what would you do? What would you think of somebody who did this? And you just start to talk to people and you figure out, where they're at and what they value, what's important to them, what they consider to be right and wrong. How do you feel about your parents? If your parents wanted you to do something you didn't want to do, what would you do? Are you an individualist? Are you a familist? You figure the whole thing out. So if you don't know what your values are, you probably just need to think about it a bit. If you're trying to figure out what your highest ideal is, that's a great time to go and talk to some great minds. Keep your critical thinking skills on. Keep your antenna up. But start to encounter great minds and great ideas. And then if you want to know what codependence is, what people are really trying to get at when they use the term, which is sort of a catch-all term. What they really mean is when you give up your core values. You compromise your core beliefs. I explain this to you. And you now use it all the time in therapy, right? I sat down one day and explained this to our resident therapist, Shri. And you now, how often do you use this?
All the time. Like, actually, in almost every scenario it comes up.
Yeah. And you never learned this in school. And when I explained it to you, you're like, wow. Like, look, how did I miss that, right? Yeah, so this is, I thought about it one day. Like, what does it really mean to be codependent? What's the problem with codependence? What's wrong with depending on people? Why people saying independence, that's ridiculous. Let's look at the world. I sat down and thought about it for a day. Dependence is great. It's also fun. It's fun to be able to count on your friends. It's fun to be a part of something bigger than yourself. And so it becomes a problem when you lose your sense of self and you compromise. How do you know you're losing your sense of self? Because you compromise your core values for the other person's approval. When a Vaishnava feels sad because somebody else is suffering, they don't compromise their core values. They just have a love that's big enough that the whole world becomes their family. And their empathy is extreme, but it's not crippling. It's not paralyzed. That's another phenomenon. You know, people are like, I'm an empath. 1956 science fiction book from a guy out of Scotland. Got adopted by Star Trek in 1968. They made an episode called The Empath. That's where the term came from. A 1968 episode of Star Wars. And the way the term empath is used nowadays, it's used to say, hey, I'm super sensitive, and therefore you have to be extra careful around me and not stress me out in any way, shape, or form, because I'm so beautiful and amazing. If you disturb me at all with any of your drama, it will ruin my day, because I'm such a better individual than you with my incredible ability and capacity to feel things. They have HSP, highly sensitive person, now. It's like they're trying to formalize the study of it. So there are people who are super sensitive to lights and sounds and things like that. I'm not trying to deny that. And there's a bunch of study in that field. I haven't really inspected it. I'm pretty sure the empaths are trying to legitimize themselves through that stuff. I'll have to look it over one day to really be sure. But, you ever met somebody like, I'm an empath? And it's basically like, don't bug me at all. I don't want any of your drama. Because I'm better than you. You cretin. Tread carefully in my presence. You plebe. Right? And so, anyway, it's from a 1968 episode of Star Wars. The Vaishnava, who's described as para dukkha dukhi, is their integrity doesn't get compromised, their values don't get compromised. Rather, they love in a deep and profound and universal enough way that when they see somebody else suffering, they feel that person's pain and want to help them. Not in a way which is crippling, which in a way which is actually empowering and ennobling because their core value system is everybody's a child of God, everybody deserves love, everybody deserves help, everybody needs somebody who sees the best in them, everybody's got light in them. It's just a question of figuring out a way to help bring that out, and I can be a part of that. Do you guys follow this? So it's not the ability to feel someone else's pain that's a problem. It's when it cripples you and destroys your own value system. And sometimes we join those two things together as if feeling pain for someone is equivalent to losing your sense of self. You follow? But those are actually two different things. The ability to love universally, feel pain for another, and then the tendency to become crippled by your attachment. Those are two different things. One of them is you're broken. You have no sense of self. And therefore you fascistically align yourself with somebody else and lose yourself in another person. The other one is you're so developed that you're so rock solid that you can now reach out to and uplift somebody else. And you can feel for other people without it dragging you down, and you can reach down and pick people up by your empathy and help them do better. One is based on strength, the other is based on weakness. One is mature, the other one is immature. One is the fruit of a deeply imbibed value system, the other one is the result of not having a value system, a proper value system. One comes out of fullness, the other one comes out of emptiness. They're actually two totally different things, but we usually merge them together. But to understand what we mean when we say Vaishnava, you have to learn to separate them. Did you guys follow this? Let me say it again 3 times fast. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Life is about connecting with people. Children connect with adults in attachment theory. Children start to mimic the sound of their mother's voice and they're crying at the age of 3 weeks old. We're made for socialization. Human beings are social mammals. It's critical for the survival of our species, and when you isolate people, they go crazy. Independence isn't the goal, nor is independence to interdependence, and what does that even mean? Dependence is natural. The real thing is pick who you're going to be dependent on and be strong enough in your value system that your value system doesn't waver for a little bit of cheap affection. When we think of codependence, people don't know what the term means. The term has a recent origins in the 40s in the AA movement. It's turned into a catch-all phrase for unhealthy relationships. It refers to the narcissist and the dependent, but it also just refers to people who are just kind of sloppy. It's kind of like all over each other and can't figure out life and just kind of like go to the bathroom with like another person because they can't figure it out on their own. And it becomes crippling and unhealthy. Devotees who are described as feeling the suffering of somebody else as their own would almost sound like they could be codependent from the popular notions of the term. But they're not. They're not because their value system's set. They're not because they lift people up instead of getting pulled down. They're not because their own situation isn't put at risk by their empathy. Rather, their value system is that they love and see good in everybody, and the result of that is when they see somebody suffering unnecessarily, they naturally want to lift them up. Do you guys follow this? Now, to make it practical, what does it mean? It means start doing things for the people around you selflessly. For instance, Madhuri runs a yoga studio. Someone sent her feces in the mail yesterday. She She got a bag of poop in the mail. Somebody, USPS'd it to her. So she called me up. It was like 8 things she needed my help with. And the first one was that she was holding a bag of poop in her hand. So she started thinking about who might have sent it to her. I had an idea who sent it to her. And she had an idea. She was wrong. I was right. And I didn't tell you who I thought, but I thought of him yesterday when we were talking. She was all spun out about it. So I was like, all right, what address was it sent from? And so I got the address, AS Enterprises in Allison Park, Pennsylvania. So I looked it up. And sure enough, poopsenders.com. It's a company that will anonymously send poop to somebody for $30. That actually comforted me. Because it means the person just went online. It's another level of commitment. If you've got a hater, it goes and collects feces. Also, you got to wonder if it's human poo. You know what I mean? It gets a lot more dangerous real quick. If somebody's like, but I'm assuming poopsenders.com, those guys are wearing white gloves in some kind of sterile environment, and they're packing it really carefully. And, you know what I mean? Right? They got 401ks and a HAZAT plan. It's like probably a pretty safe thing. At least I imagine it like this. And they're clever. There's a little card in it that says, want to know who sent it? Turn over. But the only way you can turn the card over, because it's in the bag, is to open the bag, reach in, grab the card off the poop, turn it over. And then it says on the other side, we'll never tell, poopsenders.com. Right? Brilliant, right? How many people have been burned by that? You're like, I don't know who it is. Ah! Right? And then you're like, I'm going to send this to somebody else. Great marketing. So I helped her figure this whole thing out. Why? Because she was in anxiety, and it's my job to help her feel better. Then today, I rolled over to the temple, checked the mail, and there was a package with my name on it from USPS. And I thought, AS Enterprises? And I looked on the package and said, AS Enterprises. And I said, cool. And just threw it away. Didn't open the package. Didn't wonder if I was going to turn over that card. Didn't get bent out of shape at all. And immediately knew who sent it. Some disgruntled person I had to deal with last week. Why would he send it to the temple and to Madhuri? Because they don't know any of our addresses. So they just pick places of business that are associated with me. And because she's my student and has a yoga studio, probably they'll send one to Ahimsa too. And so they just sent one to some, probably they'll send one here. And so they just picked out random addresses they had that they knew were associated with me because they don't have people's personal addresses. And so that had nothing to do with her. It was just because of her relationship with me. So I said, just see, this is like the fruit of our relationship. Poop. And then Madhuri said, if that's like the fruit, it's like well worth it. And I felt, it was a nice thing to say. It's just I was walking in. Whole class came out of that. So I do stuff for people. Pretty much, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours a day, 7 days a week. I do shit for people. Excuse me. Whatever it might be, you know? Helping people with their childhood trauma, helping people find a job, figure out what they're going to study in college, deal with their addictions, deal with their vices, deal with their depression, start a relationship, be successful in that relationship, move forward in their own life, whatever it might be. Whether I benefit from it or not, it's not really a factor. I help people because I can, because they need it. I think I can make a difference in their life. I found value in that. I find value in that just because. It's a practical way to feel somebody's suffering as your own. You help people. Rather than it being this abstract ideal that like a Vaishnava feels another suffering to be their own, like it's some result, it's some goal, it's something that happens as a result of whatever. That's not actually the case. If you want to have that be your reality, then you simply busy yourself helping other people. It's a practical manifestation of that mindset. It's a mindset as much as it's the fruit of one's devotion. It's a mindset. You want to love everybody? Start loving everybody. You want to care about people? Start caring about people. You want to feel somebody suffering to be your own? Start helping people as if it was your problem. Treat others as you wish to be treated. It's a very practical thing. It's a mindset. You can start practicing it today. And I find that when you do that, when you give selflessly to help people, somehow or other, you end up benefiting from it like I did today. You know, I researched the whole thing for her to help her out. We spent like half an hour on poop kata. And then the result was, the thing came to the temple today, and I went over and I saw it, and I was like, oh. And I was like, ASM present. I was like, ah. Ha ha. No need to open it, no need to think about it, no need to get vexed. Put two and two together, immediately knew who it was. Thought, I know his home address. I thought maybe I'll send him back one. Actually put my name on it, you know? There's no we'll never tell. Put my name in it. But I put my name in it. Took Ram Das in there. No problem at all. There's a whole movement. You know, you Google this, there's a whole movement of people who got poop and like got really bent out of shape about it and wrote about it, described it, and took photographs of it and explained the phenomena. It's like there's a whole world of poop receivers out there. Yeah. So, a devotee is defined as someone who feels another's suffering to be their own, and who therefore lives their life doing the greatest para upakar, the greatest good for another, the greatest welfare work of helping people. And that's not just the result, that's the way to get to the goal. You want to feel humble? Be humble. You want to love somebody? Start loving them. It's a mindset and a set of activities and a way to live your life. And that's what gets you to it being your internal state of consciousness. And so what does it look like to feel someone suffering to be your own? It means you have a set of values that you don't compromise for anybody. And then you spend the rest of your life reaching down and picking people up and helping them. And have it not be about you and what they can do for you, and feel satisfied that you did some good for them and you helped them out a little bit. And let that be enough. And the result of that is that things tend to go your way because you're helping people out, and even though maybe, like I wasn't thinking, I'm going to receive poop, so I got to figure this all out for myself. But somehow or other, the thing I did for her ended up making my life way easier. It definitely would have cost me like an hour of my life. I would have freaked out and been totally disturbed. You know what I mean? But instead I saved myself all that time and the hassle and the hand washing and everything. I mean, I still wash my hands, but I wasn't like, ah. It wasn't like that. What a life. Find something beautiful worth living for. Discover your value system. Find the highest ideals. Feel free to borrow from other people. Same way you don't have to make your own gym equipment. Doesn't mean it's not your own. Doesn't mean you don't get the credit. And then part of that value system can be helping people. And then learn to feel joy from helping other people and bringing out the best in other people. And then they end up helping you back. Not all of them. You know, for every like 10 people I help, 3 of them hate me. And like 5 of them like just bail, take my help, just move on. And then like 1 or 2 reciprocate. That's great. That's like, you're looking for diamonds, you know, and you're like, and you're finding diamonds every like, you know what I mean? Every 10 shovels full of earth, every 10 times you shovel, you get a diamond, or every 2 diamonds every 10 times you shovel. That's like, those are great odds. Does that make sense? All right. Let's do a little kirtan.